All right, I need to give a heads up to all the Mismatch fans. Me and Kirk Goldsberry recorded this episode of the Mismatch this morning. Everybody went their separate ways. I went down to work, and then I find out that Taylor Jenkins has been fired from the Memphis Grizzlies. That's why it is not included in this episode of the Mismatch. I will just say this very quickly. I am of the opinion right now that after getting smoked by the Oklahoma City Thunder last night, it's gone on a long time. The Grizzlies have gone the wrong way very fast, and they have not beaten a good team in the better part of 2 months. So I think they're trying to do something. They think that if they kept on doing what they were doing, you're going to have to play a good team in the playoffs, and then you're going to get smoked out of the playoffs. And so what can you do with 10 games left in the season to try to change that trajectory? Maybe they'll be wrong, maybe they'll be right, but since the calendar turned, things have gone the wrong way, and they have been totally unable to beat good teams. And you have to play a good team when you get to the playoffs. And so the coach is the one that ends up getting the blame. Taylor Jenkins is a really good guy. I think he's going to win a lot of games in the NBA as a head coach somewhere else. And I hate to see him go. But this is professional sports. And if you're not getting it done and you're a team with high hopes, and those high hopes are unwarranted because your team turns the ball over a ton, the defense has gone to hell, all of that, then unfortunately you get what you get. It is absolutely shocking. I can't believe it. We'll obviously talk a lot more about this at the beginning of the week when Jacoby rejoins me on the show. That being said, I wanted to get that out of the way, let you know that happened after we recorded. Kirk Goldsberry is absolutely amazing, and you're going to love this episode. Thanks. Welcome to the Mismatch. I'm Chris Vernon, and joining me this week from TheRinger.com is Kirk Goldsberry. Kirk, thanks for being here, man.
Oh, man, it's a dream come true. Thanks for having me, dude. This is the best.
We want to give our thoughts to Jacoby and his wife. Our big congratulations. We've talked about it a lot on the show over the course of the last couple of weeks, and the baby came. Everybody is healthy. Jacoby will be back next week, but super exciting news in the Jacoby household. Kirk, let's start with last night, and we'll just hit a couple big things that happened. Maybe the best ending or most exciting ending of the year in the Bulls-Lakers game. The Bulls, after the Pacers-Lakers game where LeBron got the tip in, I remember as he's walking off the court, he's like, look, we got to go get our rest because in the same way that the Pacers grabbed the ball off the rim and ran, that's what the Bulls are going to do to us too. And certainly it looked like with less than 20 seconds left, the Lakers had it in the bag.
Yep.
And this is, I think 99% of the games kind of all blend together. I feel like we're going to remember that one, right?
Well, they're positioning for playoff seeding right now. So every loss is a big loss. Then they won by the skin of their teeth in Indiana the night before, which I think is a relevant point because it's a back-to-back. It's a road back-to-back. LeBron is old AF, as the kids say. And I think they ran out of gas. No disrespect to Josh Giddey, and it was a great game from the Bulls' perspective, but they hadn't played since Monday. And I think it was just a case, if you ever play pickup hoops, it's like you stay on for one game too many, and you start to look like LeBron looked at the end of that game. You throw a sloppy bounce pass, you don't close out on jump shooters, and that's what I attributed to. Again, no disrespect. One of the highlights of the season for anybody, but Josh Giddey really just looked like the best player on the court last night too.
Okay, so let's start with, we'll get back into Giddey. Let me ask you, one of the things that Jacoby and I have been talking about a lot is the challenge of whether or not we should draw a lot from these games down the stretch. You have this bizarre combination of guys trying to stay healthy, players sitting out for teams just trying to get to the finish line that is the playoffs. And then you have a slew of teams that are actively attempting to lose. And when I watched Cooper Flagg last night, I was like, all right, kind of makes sense. How much should we draw? Should we just delineate which ones we're going to draw from? Because I felt like, that Pacers-Lakers game was super high level. Mm-hmm. And then I know what inevitably comes from the Lakers losing a game like that to the Bulls. And it's like, well, look at the Lakers recently. Yeah. It started off hot with LeBron and Luka, but now it's kind of gone the wrong way. What do you make of what we should draw from these individual games down the stretch?
It's the weirdest time of the season, right? Because you don't know what to make. So, like you're saying, you turn on League Pass on a Wednesday or whatever, and there's 10 games. Like 5 of them you can almost throw out right away because we have teams that are just like, bro, I want Cooper Flagg. I'm doing whatever I can. So Sixers, Wizards, here we go. What can you take from that? I don't know. But I think in the case of a game like Bulls-Lakers, these are two teams that are posturing for better playoff position right now. They're trying to win that game. I think the Lakers are trying to develop some kind of rhythm with their new look, their new roster, and they are slumping. And I think if you look at like a 5-game set of games, like your Grizzlies too, they're kind of slumping at a time where they're trying to win to get a home playoff series in round 1. Chicago is trying to get into that 8th spot in the East. And I think when you could just say, Verno, like, hey, both teams are trying to win here, I can tell. Then it's fair game analytically. It's fair game to sort of connect dots into the playoffs from a performance like that. And ultimately, I think that was a great game for the Bulls, who, by the way, dude, one of the hottest teams in all of the NBA right now. Like, watch Josh Giddey. This is his breakout, and I think last night, from a Bulls perspective, was like proof that they have a guy now. Josh Giddey's a guy, dude.
Okay, so what do we make of this? Because, look, just for the numbers, since the All-Star break, Josh Giddey, 23 points per game, 10.5 rebounds per game, 9.2 assists, 1.6 steals, shooting 53% from the field, 52% from 3, and 81% from the line. And then last night had 25, 14, and 11.
And it's more than the stats. He was a leader last night. Like the crazy thing about the buzzer beater, for those of you who missed it somehow, he hit a 47-foot buzzer beater from the Bull logo to beat LeBron and Luka in a magical moment. But the craziest thing about that play, Verno, is he inbounded the ball at the baseline. Like he is the grown-up on the team. He's a very young player. He's like their leader. He inbounds the ball. I forget who catches it, throws it right back, and he dribbles from one baseline to midcourt and hits that shot. He was the inbounder on the key play before that too. He had the steal against LeBron. It's not just the stats. He was the one making all of the plays for the Bulls, not just the shot that will go down in Bulls history to beat the Lakers, but all of the plays in that incredible comeback had Josh Giddey's fingerprints on it. And to me, it just epitomizes the stats are one thing. This is not just an empty stats guy. He's starting to become a leader of a good basketball team.
I mean, it feels like over the course of like the past couple of weeks, he might have made himself like $100 million. I'm not kidding. Like, right. Well, I don't know what the price prediction for Josh Giddey was whenever extension time comes up, but it feels like it's gone up exponentially. Like the way you're talking about Giddey is just not the way we talked about him a month ago.
No, not at all. And I think it's a profound point. And I think the Bulls, like I said, have recently got off Zach LaVine. They got off DeMar. And I think they're starting to see they might have something here. And it's great news for a franchise that, dude, they've been middle of the pack and that NBA purgatory for, it seems like, longer than any other team. This dude feels like he could be a piece of a playoff team for a long time. I don't know where the ceiling is now, but like you're saying, it's higher than I thought it was 3-4 weeks ago. It's higher than I thought it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I think last night, you can read into a performance like that because in a game featuring LeBron James and Luka Doncic, that dude looked like the best player on the court when it mattered the most. Right. And I think not many NBA players can say that. Not many NBA players can say that in a big win like that.
It's so crazy because you watch last night, and obviously when you've won 60 games, you have no regrets.
Right.
And you do watch it and go, man, are we going to look back on this? This is like, you don't want to get crazy like a Harden thing, but it's like, bro, the guy that you gave up ends up, because that has happened. It feels like there are other guys that we have seen that have popped off that like Oklahoma City just like didn't have room for.
Right.
And it's like they just over and over again find these guys, and it's like, man, maybe Giddey wasn't going to be the ideal fit for Oklahoma City, but look at what he looks like now. And obviously Kobe White, like you look at it, and I know they're excited about Buzelis, and you're like, geez, this team that we just thought is like this consistently middle of the pack, mediocre, the play-in Bulls, as it were, like maybe the future was right there and we just didn't even notice it.
Yeah, they've won 8 of their last 10, 4 straight. Aside from the Celtics, they're the hottest team in the Eastern Conference. They're currently a play-in team. Yep. And if they can climb in, I mean, it's just, we need good teams, by the way, in this Eastern Conference play-in situation. That is so it's good news for NBA fans too, that there's some competent looking team in that Eastern Conference play-in, because right now it's Hawks, Magic, Bulls, Heat. The Heat are doing everything they can to end their season, and so we need this Bulls team from an entertainment perspective for the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Like, I think they're a year away from being a year away, to paraphrase Fran Fraschilla, but that's better than what I was saying about the Chicago Bulls before the trade deadline, dude.
And you also look up and you go, geez, man, if you could pair Giddey up with one other guy, you're not that far away from maybe having an awesome team.
100%. He had 14 rebounds last night. He led the game in rebounds. He is the type of player that makes people around him better. Like a rim running big would look good next to Josh Giddey. They have something to build around. He's not just a guy. He's a guy who could make players better around him. So I think the Bulls have something to be excited about here. And I think Josh Giddey is emerging as one of the most surprising players of this whole season. And maybe not most improved this year. There's a lot of candidates for that. But, last night was one of the most sort of shocking moments for a player that I remember. It's like, oh my God, like Josh Giddey, Jesus, like go watch the last minute of that game. He did everything. And it was a great moment for the Bulls.
All right. The team that he left, the aforementioned Oklahoma City Thunder. All right. This is where you got to be a counselor, Goldsberry. So SGA had 37 points in 34 minutes, his 25th 35-point game of the year. The next most, by the way, in the league is 17. Mm-hmm. He was otherworldly. I was obviously watching this game. It was 99-99 with 7 minutes left, 7 minutes and 20 seconds left. And Memphis lost 125-104. It right. was, the second they just decided to crank that thing up, Memphis could not score, and Oklahoma City could not miss. They sweep the season series. They have dog-walked the Grizzlies throughout this year, and it has been a long time since Memphis has got a win against a good team. I guess they'll get a crack this weekend when they're playing against the Lakers, but what happened to my team?
Well, you don't have your SGA character. I don't know what's going on with your guy. That's where I'd start, because I love the team when it's fully healthy. This is, again, the Western Conference is loaded. I'm not going to say they're a favorite, but when they're fully stocked and they have their guy, I like them a lot. So I think whatever is happening with Morant needs to resolve itself. If you said, hey, we're playing Oklahoma City without John Morant, I'm saying you're going to lose by 10 or 15. Oh, you lost by 20. Okay, fine. Yep. So I don't take a lot. You asked earlier, can we take a lot from these games? No, dude. You can't. Mm-hmm. You go to Oklahoma City without John Morant and you play them, and what would you expect to happen? So right. I'll excuse that one. They are sliding. They need to get everything in a row before the playoffs. It looks like they're going to play the Lakers in a 4-5. It remains to be determined who's the 4 and who's the 5. And I think as somebody who's prepared for a Memphis playoff series, that's a big advantage for Memphis to have 4 of the 7 games in Memphis. So they need to end the game strong, or the season strong. I see they have the Celtics, the Nuggets, the Lakers,
Brutal.
the Warriors, the Pistons, the Wolves. So they're going to lose some more games, particularly, dude. And this is what I'd ask you is like, when are we going to see your guy come back? That's the biggest question in Memphis.
The hope is tomorrow night against the Lakers, but this has all been quite bizarre because he had his best game of the season. He was the best player on the floor against Cleveland. He had nobody else come for the ride with him, but he was over 40 points and he was the best player on the floor. And then the next night, second half of a back-to-back, he hadn't been playing second half of back-to-backs. He's been dealing with this shoulder thing kind of the whole year. They say he's out with shoulder soreness. The next game, he's listed with hamstring soreness. The next game, he's listed with hamstring soreness. And the next game, he's listed as hamstring strain. So we can't figure out whether or not, like, something happened. Did it happen in practice, whatever? Or, like, is something wrong with his hamstring? Or is this just what we're going on, and this is happening around the league, which is, bro, you got to just bubble wrap people until you get to the playoffs, because the only thing that matters, right, our seed is much less important than having Ja Morant out on the floor. And so if there is the slightest ailment, it's not worth, even if you lose, what it's not worth is, God forbid, he tweak a ham, because those soft tissue things, if there's something wrong with them, right, those soft tissue things, God forbid you tweak that, now you're out, and now you're not even playing in the playoffs. And so, that's what we were talking about when we started out. You've got this weird deal going on in the NBA where it feels like what matters most is not the game that night. What matters most at this point is having your guys available for the playoffs, because we see how it dictates everything, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's one of my nitpicks with the NBA product right now is if I were in a front office, if I were in the Memphis front office, I'd be like, let's just, like you just said, I don't care if we're 4 or 5 or 6. I care if we're whole. The craziest thing, though, is even 6 isn't safe. Like, when you look at the state of the Western Conference, you have pretty good teams like the Warriors and Timberwolves lingering. The Clippers might be the hottest team other than the Thunder in the whole league. They're climbing the ladder right now. And even 500, 4-6 over these last 10, you're playing with fire, dude.
I went through it yesterday, and I thought the number for Memphis or anybody else, when I went and looked through all the schedules, and I think the Clippers were the one that I was like, because they very well may get to 47 or 48. I thought 48 was the number that you need to get to not be in that play-in, right? And so, but again, if you're Memphis and you go 4-6, like that barely gets you there, right, down the stretch. And so you've got to, I think 48 will probably, for any team out there, keep you safe from having to play your way into the playoffs or win a game. 47, you're playing with fire at that point, probably.
But so it makes games like tomorrow night's game between the Memphis Grizzlies and the Los Angeles. You ask what you can take. That's a big game. Yep. And if Morant sits again and the Lakers win, I think that puts the Lakers sort of in the driver's seat, at least in that pair.
Yep.
But the Lakers also have a hellish schedule, probably the hardest left in the West. And they are slumping too. So what's interesting is you have these 4 and 5 teams that have harder schedules who aren't playing great basketball, and you have these climbers below them that kind of look just out of reach. But no, I'm not going to go there. If the Clippers play the next 10 games like they just played the last 10 games, they're stealing one of those spots. They're stealing one of those 2 slots. If Steph and Jimmy get going in Golden State, they could steal another one of those slots. So there's a world where one of Memphis or the Lakers is suddenly a playing team in 2 or 3 weeks. And that's crazy to me because I thought we were safe and we're not safe. Similar thing in the Eastern Conference, by the way. Some of the better teams playing basketball at the end of the season are road teams in the playoffs. And that is good for the product. I'm excited to see teams like the Pistons or I guess the Pacers are red hot. Like, they
scored 162, Kirk. Like, all right, so you spent a lot of time. You have all like the graphs that you've done over the years. You've written books about analytics. Look, I don't think you need to be an advanced mathematician to understand. In my opinion, In a regulation game, there should not be time to score 162 points, right? There's a 24-second shot clock. There's 48 minutes. So you have to score over 3 points a minute.
Dude.
Over the course of an entire game. Like there should be a time constraint that does not allow you to get to 162.
And Cooper Flagg is to blame here, dude. I mean, because they did that against the Wizards, who I always say are technically an NBA team. But 162 points is insane, bro. That's a franchise record. But Indiana and JJ Redick said it after they, again, won by the skin of their teeth to avoid what would now be a 5-game losing streak for the Lakers. That's a good team, he said over there. They're gonna be a very tough out in the Eastern Conference playoffs. You know, this is a team that got to the semifinals of the NBA playoffs last year. I think that people have forgotten that the Pacers are a real team. As I said, I think the Pistons are a real team. And I think my big note as we sit at the end of March this year, Verno, is that when you look at the seeds and you look at who's hottest entering the playoffs, it's one of the biggest disconnects we've seen. Boston is good. OKC is good. Fine. Cleveland's kind of wavering, but you have teams like the Lakers or the Warriors and the Pacers and the Pistons whose hotness does not correspond to their seed. And I think it's going to make for a very interesting first round on both sides of the bracket.
Because some of those teams, it felt like post-trade deadline, we're watching them as like, oh, shit, here comes Luka and LeBron. Oh, shit, here comes Jimmy and Curry. And they've kind of tapered off, right? Like last year, we had Dallas make those deals, and then anybody that had an awareness of what was going on, like those last 30 games, we were like, oh, boy.
Yeah.
Like they are not what their season record is not indicative of what that team is right now.
That's
right?
And people, I think analytically, we've been thinking about this for a while, but the 82-game season has a lot of issues. And one of them is like, cool, your regular season record includes wins from October, November, and December. Well, ask people in Dallas how long ago that was. Like the whole, it feels like a different season, dude. And I think if you look at who's hot since the All-Star break, you still have a big 20-game sample, and you see teams like the Pistons as the third best team in the Eastern Conference since the All-Star break, and it's not particularly close. The Warriors are 13-4 since the All-Star break. Again, if you look at their record, who cares what the Warriors were doing in December? They're a completely different group right now.
Right.
There's a completely different vibe. The 82-game season is misleading. It's like, cool. It's a marathon, but I'm also interested, if I'm looking at the tournament that starts in April, dude, who's been playing well since February? That's really, to me, more indicative of what we're going to see in the playoffs. Now, there are some other things we look at, like is John Morant sitting out?
Right.
Are we resting players, as you mentioned earlier? But I think who cares what you were doing in November? I think it's almost irrelevant, and it's another thing that's annoying about this 82-game marathon we're forced to endure every year.
Well, and it's and some of these teams, it might even be, more recent. Like I take, for instance, like let's say Dallas.
Yeah.
Okay. So Dallas they've been able to win all the games that AD plays, but again, we have like virtually no sample size, right? Like, and then you look and they've like, because stupid Phoenix did not take advantage of Kyrie and AD being out, like really just extend that by being able to get on a win streak to separate themselves. Now Phoenix is in like true peril, because if Dallas has AD the rest of the way, they could be theoretically problematic for somebody. Like, you don't want to see him. You don't want to see him if you're one of these 7, 8, 9s and having to play him in a 2-game set. Like, the idea that he could be the best player on the floor for 2 straight games is not crazy at all. If he gets there, and it's very likely that 10 seed is either going to feature Kevin Durant or Anthony Davis, which is wild.
And I think I'd take Dallas right now for that 10 spot. And again, this is the time of year where remaining schedule is sort of a trope, but it is for a reason. If you look at Phoenix, they have literally the hardest schedule left. They play the Thunder, the Celtics, the red hot Rockets, by the way. We haven't even talked about them. The Knicks, the Warriors, and the Wolves. That is 6 of the best teams. Again, in the current NBA, post All-Star break NBA. And when you look at Dallas, they play your Grizz. Who knows what that's going to look like? The Lakers. They have 2 against the Clippers, but they have more winnable games. They play teams that aren't trying to win. That's a huge part of the equation right now. They're playing the Raptors and they're playing the Nets. Like those types of games, those are almost like gimme games, are a huge part of how we project where people are going to land. It's like, oh, do you get to play the Wizards or not? Because I have 2 games against the Wizards. That could differentiate the whole thing. Who makes the playoffs and who doesn't?
Well, look, we mentioned the Memphis game against Oklahoma City earlier this week, a couple nights ago. I'm watching them play against Utah. Utah scores like 60-something points in the first half. They come out in the second half, and Colin Sexton doesn't even play. I'm like, thank God. To your point, it's like, bro, they might have beat Memphis. But they just decide, okay, no, it's going to be Bryce Sensabaugh and KJ Martin and whoever. I know Tom Haberstroh's written a bunch about this, that now teams are doing the soft quit, which is we're going to put the guys to start the game, but then we might get to halftime, and you just may get to see Isaiah Collier the rest of the game, and we're not even going to play Colin Sexton because, God forbid, Colin Sexton lead us to a win.
Dude, the quiet quitting is a real thing. I remember when we quote unquote fixed tanking a long time ago. Well, here we are, and no joke, dude. I think it's the biggest problem in the NBA right now. Maybe the biggest. It separates our league from other leagues. You would never see a college basketball team. You would never see an English Premier League team. You would never see maybe an NFL team. I remember the Patriots had the number 1 pick. They go into the last week of the season and they win and drop to number 4. We're not seeing this kind of obscene posturing in other sports. And I think it's one of the Adam Silver challenges. I think it's gotten to a new level this year. Again, I said it earlier. When I turn on League Pass on a Wednesday, I love it. I have 10 games to choose from. Well, when 5 of them aren't competitive for one reason or another, that's not great. And it also affects who's going to make the playoffs. And maybe in an unfair way. If I'm playing against teams that were trying to win early in the season and now trying to lose, that does not seem like a good way to end our season and determine who makes the postseason tournament.
Just the fact that you can look at a schedule and go, thank God we're playing a team that doesn't want to win. What is that? We know going in that Utah game. All right. That's a win because they don't want to win. They don't want to. The idea that you are having basketball games where one team does not want to win the game is the essence of sport.
It is the competition. What are we doing? Go to kids league game and be like, oh, my kid's going to win today because the other team's not going to try. That's it's the opposite of what sports is supposed to be. If you get, and I love this Tim McMahon joke, calling the top Sixers because they're desperate to try to get into the top 6. If you get the Sixers, the Jazz, the Raptors, and I'm looking at Atlanta has 3 of those gimme games left. That's going to affect the Eastern Conference playoff picture in a way that I don't think is great for the overall league when we're talking about basic concepts like sportsmanship and competition. The best basketball league in the world has teams that are actively trying to lose, and I don't think that's ideal.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. Life gets busy, and we could all use an extra hour or save one. With Walmart Express Delivery, you can do just that. Simply place your order. In as fast as an hour, it's at your door. Use promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order. No hassle, no stress, just more time for what matters most. Visit walmart.com to order now. Promotion valid with first express delivery order. $50 minimum, subject to availability. Restrictions apply. The Mismatch is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the final stretch of the NBA season, and the playoff picture is changing by the minute. Every three-pointer and fourth-quarter comeback means that much more. And with live betting on FanDuel, you can make the playoff picture a little prettier. So whether you're looking for a hot shooter or a team that you think is due for a run, you can get in the action until the final buzzer with America's #1 sportsbook. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/mismatch and join today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. All right, 8 questions with Kirk Goldsberry. I've got one chance to get you on here. I am going to pick your brain about a myriad of things. We'll go one by one. Number 1, an underrated team in the NBA is...
I think it's the Rockets, dude. I think people are sleeping on Ime Udoka's team. I don't think this is the year for them, but I don't think they're getting talked about enough. I think they've won 9 of their last 10. They are the toughest, maybe the second toughest defense in the West behind the juggernaut. And I love that team. And I think hiring Ime Udoka was one of the best coaching transactions of the last 5 years for the Houston Rockets. It immediately gave them an identity transplant and immediately helped their player development, which had so many young, talented guys. But credit to Ime, credit to that brand. They got a brand down there. So Houston Rockets.
And, we always talk about augmenting a young team with the right kind of vets.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Van Vliet and Dylan Brooks and Steven Adams.
Yep.
Like, these are the kind of guys that you want, real pros that take their jobs very seriously and also compete. They care about winning. Every single time they're out on the court, like, that bleeds over to those other guys. And you have to wonder, especially given the way they've taken off since Fred has come back, like, what if they didn't lose Van Vliet for all that time? Like, basically, this terrible ankle injury that kept him out for, like, he got hurt in January and the guy came back in March. And it's like, geez, what if they would have had him? Like, their record might be more obscene than it is this season because they really struggled. They lost him, then they lost Thompson for an amount of time, obviously. But the Van Vliet thing felt like it had an outsized effect on them because, Jalen Green's play went down. They were really kind of playing without a point guard, and they just need him to organize everything. Mm-hmm. And when they have Van Vliet, I bet their numbers are through the roof.
Yeah, they're going to win 54, 55 games in a Western Conference where there's not a lot of easy wins. And I think you're right. I love the point. I love Steven Adams. I know he's not the player we remember from Oklahoma City, but he's still that toughest guy in the NBA by a lot of people's standards. And he brings that professional element. So I think you're right. Dylan Brooks, love him or hate him. And I know you guys have some opinions, but he is defensive attitude in a can. And I think
he look, as much as my big thing was with Dylan was always shoot less or make more, right? He made less shots than literally anybody in the league, percentage wise. Like, here's how many I took, and 3-pointers. Okay, his last year in Memphis. So it was always, but the good was always undeniable, which is he cares every single night. And that is honestly about 1% of the league cares every single night. And he cares every single night, whether his team wins or loses. And it does bleed over to the rest of the group. There's no way around that.
In a locker room with that guy, Steven Adams and Ime Udoka, you can't be a young knucklehead.
That's right.
That's what they did. And credit to everybody who put that together because the chemistry is working. They're the most surprising team for me in the Western Conference. And I think they're the most underrated team in the NBA.
An underrated player this season has been.
I think I'll go Beasley. I don't think people quite realize that Malik Beasley is Klay Thompson now. I don't think...
This guy is a sprawl ball king.
Oh, He is a catch
this
and
is
shoot.
why you wrote the book.
Yeah. This is the kind of player who you need on your team. And he might be the best catch and shoot guy in the league right now. And I don't think people realize that. I don't think people realize how important he's been to this resurgence in Detroit. He is the perfect spacing weapon next to Cade Cunningham. And I love him. I love his little shimmy. He's brought that little, positive vibe to Detroit. I love what I'm seeing from Detroit going into the playoffs. And Beasley to me is the name when I think of who's most underrated in the league in 2025.
Isn't it so strange that he's one of these guys that, like, it's not like he languished away on sorry teams. He would feel like the perfect complement to LeBron or to Giannis or to, like, all these places he's literally been, or Jokic. Like, all he's played in all these places, and yet it takes the most when he's playing off of Cade Cunningham and Tobias Harris. It's very strange.
I mean, it's a real psychological thing, catching and shooting a basketball. And, if you shoot 35% one year and 40% the next year, people are like, whoa, this guy's good. Like, you shoot 100 threes, you make 5 more. Like, that's the difference between average and good. It's a crazy psychological thing, like being a closer in baseball. And, because it's a lot of mental toughness, and he's survived it, but he's had a couple of those years that I think the Lakers fans listening right now are like, cool, where was this when we had him? Like, he was below average. And that's fair to say too. But right now, he's the best catch and shoot guy in the whole league.
You know what? There's part of it too. And maybe we are seeing this with Josh Giddey. And the part of it is development. The other part is maybe it's just way, like you jarred my thoughts when you said mentally, just the idea that, like, when I miss this shot, nobody's groaning. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
it's almost like if any shot you miss in Milwaukee, any shot you miss with the Lakers, any shot you miss, frankly, for Giddey in Oklahoma City, but nobody cares if Malik Beasley misses a shot in Detroit. And nobody cares if Josh Giddey misses a shot in Chicago. And there's something about that freedom where it's like, okay, look, I'm really just going to get 6 shots, and any of them that I miss, people are going to be like, oh, just get him out of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, LeBron starts looking over at the bench being like, get this guy out. It's like, maybe it is just something as Cade Cunningham being a better vibe for him as his quarterback. I love that note. And I think that could be part of it. And it's just like a lower pressure situation. But for whatever reason, I think he deserves it as what do we say, most underrated player in the league right now.
All right, if there is a dangerous, likely play-in team, it is...
Gotta say the Golden State Warriors, right? You gotta say the Golden State Warriors. These guys have won the Western Conference 6 of the last 10 years. And I know this is a different team. I'm not saying they're going to win the Western Conference. I'm saying when you look over and you see Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, and Steve Kerr game planning against you, that kind of sucks if you're a 2 seed or a 1 seed.
I mean, what a night. Look, I've lived this because the Grizzlies were the 2 seed 2 years in a row. And you look up and now you're playing LeBron and AD. And it's like, oh, God. Right? Yeah. Like, I mean, if you're Houston, that is such a booby prize. Like, you just got to hope that it's not that there really aren't very good options outside of, honestly, Memphis. Like, they're the only ones that you would want to drop to 7 because you feel like, okay, we're not having to play some kind of veteran-laden team. The rest of those, whether it's the Lakers, whether it's the Warriors, whether it's, the Clippers, like, those are all, like, geez, man, I don't want to have to play them in a 7-game series.
Dude, it's the difference between the West and the East. And this is something we'll vibe on because when you're the Spurs and you're the 1 seed, and you remember this, you get Memphis and you lose. Like, there's a world where a 1 or 2 seed in the West can lose this first round. And even OKC, if they get the wrong matchup and they get an injury at the wrong time, this thing could end. Ask my friends in San Antonio. You can lose to an 8 seed in the Western Conference. You know you can't lose to in the Eastern Conference an 8 seed. The Celtics and the Cavs are enjoying a different privilege, Eastern privilege. The Western Conference 1 seed and 2 seed just rarely get something like that. And whoever comes out of a play-in tournament is going to feel pretty good because they're going to be like the Wolves or the Warriors have talent, have playoff experience, and are going to feel confident going into a first-round series in a way that I'm sorry the Hawks, Magic, or Bulls won't feel confident going into Cleveland or Boston.
All right, so you're going Warriors on that. All right. A change that would immediately benefit the NBA.
We said it earlier, dude. They got to fix this tanking thing. It's polluting 10, 20, 30% of our inventory. It's polluting the end of the season. You go to a game, and I was up in Boston for the Sloan Conference, and I went to Celtics Sixers. Again, top Sixers. Shout out to McMahon. They were in full top Sixers mode. They're trying to preserve their top 6 protected pick. And I got treated to a G League lineup from the Philadelphia 76ers on one of my only nights to see, the defending champs in their own building. The Celtics react by putting it their B lineup. And it's like, this sucks. And you look over and you're looking at a family of 4 from New Hampshire that spent $600 and 8 hours of driving time to go see their one Celtics game of the year. And you're just like, this sucks. They need to fix this, dude. Again, this is the problem they need to fix. It hurts the television rating. It hurts the positivity around the product. Tanking is a scourge on our league.
So I had a guy tweet us, because Jacoby and I have talked about this quite a bit. Like, what can you do? And let me throw this idea at you. I wish I would have gotten his name. I'm sorry. I don't have the name offhand. But his idea was basically, how about this? What if you're in the lottery, then after the next year that you're in the lottery, you cannot get the number 1 pick. And the next year you're in the lottery, you can't get the number 2 pick. And the next year you're in the lottery. So if you are consecutively in the lottery, you cannot get the number 1 pick, and then number 2, and then number 3, right? So I can't get Cooper Flag if I was in the lottery last year, right?
Yep.
And so it's basically encouraging these teams in order to be, right? Okay, that biggest prize, that franchise-altering guy is not there. It was at least an idea that gave me a moment where I was like, these are the kind of penalties that people will respond to because, right, like you even think about the way the money thing's gone, Kirk, where they've looked at like Ballmer and they've looked at Ishbia and they said, okay, these financial penalties are of no consequence. We have to add basketball penalties.
Right.
And now, even this guy that just spent $6 billion on the Celtics, when he talked about it and he talked about their roster going forward, it was basically like, hey, it's not the luxury tax we're worried about. We're worried about the basketball implications of this, that like we may lose a draft pick down the road. We may have these kind of things take place with us. And so I don't know. I don't know what kind of basketball penalty you could assess someone that would discourage them from losing on purpose.
Well, I think you look at what's incentivizing them to lose on purpose, and it is the NBA draft is the problem. And if you look at college basketball, the best Cooper Flag, he doesn't go to the worst team in college basketball. That would be ridiculous.
Right.
That would be ridiculous. Okay, you're going to go to Prairie View A&M, Cooper, or whatever it is. You're not.
They tried to keep him in Maine. Like there was that moment. Remember, there was that moment where
he should have played for the Black Bears, man. He would have looked good in that light blue. But I think there is imagine, and this is the mind exercise I like to do when I talk about tanking. Imagine if Cooper Flag could sign with any non-playoff team as a free agent, and maybe the worse your record is, you get a little bit more money to give to this player. All of a sudden, they'd be auditioning for this dude. And that the games that we're watching right now, like, look, you could play with this guy. You could play with that guy. Our coach knows what we're doing. You wouldn't be throwing these games away. You'd be trying to say, hey, we're pretty good. Instead, we're like, we got to get into that top 4 or the top 5 or whatever it is. So the draft is the problem. the draft odds are the problem. I don't have the solution, hand up. But what I think we can all say what's currently happening is not working.
Well, and the other thing, Kirk, and I talked to Kevin O'Connor about this earlier this week, where I told him, I don't have all the answers, but I know this. If you're Adam Silver, and obviously they started with this, $100,000 fines and all this crap, there's going to be a real meeting that takes place this offseason about it, because you cannot put this stuff on NBC, Peacock, Amazon. Like, they got all the money, but the last thing on earth they can have is that. All right, I've got all these new outlets. They've spent a fortune on this.
Yeah.
They've spent a fortune on their in-studio talent. They've spent a fortune on like the infrastructure for them to carry the NBA, and then it be a huge flop because people tune in and they're not getting to see the stars play. And so I would imagine that there's going to be a massive onus put on this simply because it's the first year of this new TV deal. They have to look. The product we have this year, or the example that you gave of going to that can't happen.
It can't happen. But it's happening all the time. I mean, it's a bigger problem than just the lottery. So I think if they could fix tanking and all of the games were competitive, what a concept, that would be the best thing for the product.
The top 3 seed that should worry the most about a first round exit.
Oh, this is a good one, dude. I have candidates for this one. I got the Knicks. Okay, they're a candidate.
Okay.
I got the Rockets. And I got the Nuggets. Those are my 3 candidates. And let's talk.
The Nuggets!
Hey, the bottom of the Western Conference bracket is not a bunch of idiots. There's going to be some Hall of Famers. Some teams with championship rings.
Right.
So the Nuggets can't play defense right now. They are not a perfect basketball team by any means.
Right.
So they're on my list. I think I would say the Rockets out of that group of 3, although the Knicks are drawing my ire too. They're not exactly peaking at the right time. And this is before the Brunson stuff. I think the Pistons are not going to play them. I don't think there was a time where I was like, I'm going to pick the Pistons over the Knicks.
I think the Pistons beat them twice in Madison Square Garden this year.
But I think I think the Pistons are playing so well, they're the 5. So I think, and then you look at the Damian injury. I think we're looking at Milwaukee, New York, which is also no easy thing. If Giannis is fully healthy, I don't care that Damian's not out. That's a championship team. Like that, Giannis has a ring, and Brook Lopez has a ring. But I think my answer, unfortunately, is the aforementioned Houston Rockets, who are just too young. They haven't seen it. They're not going to have the guy at the end of the game, which I think is the biggest flaw in the architecture. Fred VanVleet trying to get a bucket with 3 minutes left in a game 3. That's a tough look for me when it's Jimmy Butler guarding him or when it's Anthony Edwards guarding him. I think that's a fair comparison. A fair criticism of the Rockets. So I like where they're at, but dude, I think the Western Conference is so thick that first round matchup is going to be tough.
Yeah. And it's the part of, as I always talk about, getting your playoff scars. Every team has to do it, right? You have to go through it. You have to get the reps, the bright lights, and then the next time you're infinitely better for it. But most of these teams, any of the teams that have turned into something, generally they've had to be in the playoffs. Even the Warriors, in 15, they had been to the playoffs twice before they ever and had 3 different playoff series before they were able to break through. But it's very difficult for young teams at the outset. And so, all right, you go Rockets on that. And I think that's fair. It's just, this is not a demerit on the Rockets. No. This is credit to the strength of the West and the fact that it's a bunch of veteran-laden teams down there.
Yeah,
like,
but
if that Kawhi Leonard looks like he did last week against the Cavs, good luck.
Well, I mean, dude, Kawhi. So the Clippers are nasty officially. And I want to talk about it briefly because Kawhi is back. Harden is looking good. Ty Lue is one of the best postseason coaches in the league. Ben Simmons
I know.
So here's what's going to happen. They're going to end.
How about you watch them? They bring Derek Jones Jr.
Yeah.
They bring Ben Simmons. It's like all these condors, and they're all like long and athletic, and obviously Van Gundy. Like this, his dream is for you to play him in an 88-84 game.
Yeah.
And so some of these young teams, they're going to drag them down into the mud when it gets to the playoffs and be like, all right, we're going to play. We run a play, you run a play, and let's see.
Yeah. And again, we talked about Van Fleet. Okay, that's your go-to scorer at the end of the game. Well, the Clippers have two guys better than that at the end of the games.
Right.
Now, Harden's playoff resume deserves a mention here.
Right.
Ben Simmons' playoff resume deserves a mention here. The Clippers are going to be, here's what's going to happen. They're going to end as probably one of the hottest teams in the whole league. And then we're going to look at them as the sexiest underdog in the Western Conference. And then we're going to say, oh, but they have James Harden. Oh, Ben Simmons is playing 15 minutes a game for these dudes. What do we do with that? Because it's still, if Kawhi, and you remember one of the best games Kawhi ever played was in Memphis in the Take That for Data series.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And it was, Conley, him and Conley went back and forth for, I don't know. It was a great game, but Kawhi Leonard is one of the dudes that can go win a playoff game. And I'm not saying that he's going to be reliable, but that's going to be a really hard team to pick in the first round of the Western Conference.
No, if you told anybody, you get a healthy Kawhi Leonard, I mean, we know he's one of the best 5 playoff performers there is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't want to see him. The player this year that has made you like them much more than you used to. This should be called maybe like the DeMar DeRozan Award, right? You remember when everybody, especially in the analytic community, like couldn't stand DeMar DeRozan, and then he like all of a sudden like everybody started warming up to him, like, you know what? We've been too low on it. Like he's actually pretty awesome, right? So who is the guy?
Award.
Yeah,
I got 3 candidates for this one too. I love what's going on in Cleveland, and I personally have felt an affection for Darius Garland that I hadn't had previously. Donovan Mitchell, I would also put in that category, but I would Garland from that team. And then when I look out west, I have to say Josh Giddey in Chicago too. And then out west, it is Norman Powell from the aforementioned LA Clippers. And I like Norman. I've always liked Norman as a player, but I didn't know he could score the ball like this. I didn't know he could sort of be a leader on a team. And I think he's a differentiator as a third scorer now in a Clippers lineup. So ultimately, I think I'm going to say Norman Powell because I just have always liked his game. And I think he gives them just another great scoring option. They get Bogdanovich too. Like if it clicks, dude, they're pretty low.
I know.
If it
what
clicks.
kind of odds could we have gotten on Norman Powell being infinitely better than Paul George? I mean, dude, honestly, hey, what kind of odds could we have gotten on Tobias Harris being better than Paul George? It's all so crazy. It's all so crazy.
Yeah, Tobias Harris has had a nice renaissance too, and I think that's a good story too. You could put him on this list, Verno.
Crazy,
but I think I don't want to be prisoner of the moment and go Giddey, who just had the night of his life. But I'll say Norman Powell.
Norm Powell. All right, Kirk Goldsberry. I give you $1,000 to put on one team to win the title. You put it on.
The question is, do I have the odds? Am I betting?
Yes, you get the odds.
I think the best price right now is probably the Boston Celtics. I think the best price right now. I think the favorite deserves to be the Oklahoma City Thunder. I would say the Celtics, again, because the sneaky thing is they have an easier path to the championship than the Thunder do. They have a relatively easy path. There's no easy path to the finals, don't get me wrong, but they stomped the Eastern Conference last year in the playoffs. I could see them doing that again. I love what you say about playoff scars. Maybe Cleveland just needs one more year to be that real ferocious competition to Boston in the East. But I just think they're so good. This is a classic title defense. They've had a long year, but I think the Celtics, and again, I think the reason I'm saying that, Verno, is the West is just so thick, dude. It's so thick. The Thunder have to win 2, maybe 3 really hard playoff series, whereas I don't think I'd say the same thing about the Boston Celtics.
Right. The players you would have to go through and the fact that and their resumes.
Right.
I mean, if you have to face, like, somebody is going to be in a war versus Curry and Draymond and Butler.
Yep.
And somebody's going to be in a war versus Jokic. And it's like, these are not
LeBron and Luka, bro.
LeBron and Luka.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's none of that on the East. There's no. There's no LeBron James like being a mediocre playoff team in the Eastern Conference. That character just doesn't exist. And there's like 4 of them in the West.
Well, because the only one that's won anything is Giannis, and his team is now right.
Yes,
the only one that's got like you look and you go, all right, this guy's won the title and has got an awesome team. Like the only one would be Giannis, and Giannis's team is now destroyed.
Yeah, destroyed. I mean, the player they were counting on being the number 2 there is not going to be there. It looks like so. Yeah, that's exactly right, Verno. So again, I think the Western Conference deserves respect here, and that's why I'm picking. If I'm betting $1,000 on somebody, I'm picking an Eastern Conference team, and I feel like the Celtics are still one notch above Cleveland when it comes to playoff basketball.
Part of the Kirk Goldsberry bio is that he once worked for an NBA team, the San Antonio Spurs. The best part about working for an NBA team is?
It's the fellas, dude. You're part of a tribe. You're part of a crew of people that is all aligned towards one goal, and those kinds of relationships, those kinds of coworkers, it is really special. And you develop really close relationships and friendships that you don't do in other facets of life. I love media. I love writing. But when you're working on a team and you're working on beating the Grizzlies in the playoffs or beating the Thunder in the playoffs, and everybody from Tim Duncan all the way through Manu Ginobili and down to me on the low part of the totem pole is like obsessed with this goal. It's just unmatchable in terms of the kind of relationships you build and bonds you form. So yeah, it's the human element.
And I wonder, I wonder how different your experience was because you were part of such an amazing franchise where it's like the whole thing is everybody pulling the same rope. And but there's probably other people that didn't have that same experience when they worked in professional sports or whatever. And so I always love hearing how much you liked it and how much you enjoyed being around the people and like the whole, because it's very healthy environment.
Yeah, and the people I got to work with, Ime was there, Becky Hammond was there, Borrego was there, Edere Messina was there, Pau Gasol was there. Of course, Tony, Manu, and Tim, and Popovich and RC, and it was just like Scott Marks. It was a ridiculous murderer's row of basketball experts that I would bond with and learn from, man. It was a one-of-a-time in San Antonio where, we didn't win the championship, but we had an absolute just depth to our greatness of people. And it was a really special time for me there.
Oh, that's a good one. We can end up because I want to ask you because we'll talk about the aforementioned. You mentioned Ime Udoka, right? It's a guy that you said earlier, like that Houston team, and what a great hire that was. Obviously, you knew him way back when. Did you see it?
Yeah, I mean, he is the coolest guy.
You saw it.
Yeah, I mean,
you thought this guy is going to be one of these, guys one day. Like he'll be on a sideline like Popovich is. Yeah,
and in part because we'd seen Bud and we'd seen Will Hardy and we'd seen a lot of these guys go out and do stuff. But Ime always had not the analytics stuff, I'll tell you that, but he has the man-to-man stuff that is very rare in this league. How many coaches can get in a player's face and tell them that rotation just fucking sucked? And how many guys can do that? That's a question. I don't care who your team is. Ask yourself if your coach could go to the star player and be like, bro, that rotation fucking sucked.
Yeah.
And the player takes it. And that's rare. And so Ime Udoka is, dude, probably the most competitive person I've ever met. And that's saying a lot when you work in the NBA. He is obsessed with winning. And I think that comes across. But his way with the athletes, dude, is a differentiator. And so I always knew he had that. And I'm thrilled that he's found a place in Houston where it's really, that's what he's done there, is he's turned a bunch of guys. You said it earlier, the 1% thing about guys who care. If Ime Udoka's your coach, you're going to care, or you're not going to play.
Yeah.
And again, could you say that about your team's coach?
And it's not just his own team. He called LeBron a bitch last year.
Dude, who could do that? That's right.
Who calls LeBron James?
That's what he is. And there's a lot of ways to be a great coach. You can be the great X's and O's guy, or you can be the motivator. And we know what Ime is. He is the toughest motivator in that cohort of coaches in the NBA right now.
He is Kirk Goldsberry. Kirk, thanks so much for coming on the show today, man.
Thank you, Verno. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you to our producer, Jesse Lopez, as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Must be 21 and over and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 and over and present in D.C. Got a gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.